Mabuhay! Due to the pandemic, we have to stay in our homes. If you miss traveling and seeing the wonderful architectures, don't you worry. The crew will give you a virtual tour back to the past. Let us pretend that we are in a tour bus and we, the Group 1, will be your tour guide for today. Let us make this reporting fun and informative.
Since the beginning of time,
mankind has revolutionized themselves in evolving from their primitive ways.
arts,
Music,
and various tradition of cultures
has bloomed in the greatest mind of humanity. Greetings, I am Miles Morales.
and I am Jericho Pamisa. So sit back
Relax
and join us in the great work of the Chronicles of Art History.
Ladies and gentlemen, we will be visiting three destinations: classical art, medieval art, and pop art. So sit back and enjoy. We have arrived to our first destination, the classical art.
Classical art is commonly defined as an art form from Western antiquity. This covers a wide variety of styles and mediums ranging from painting to sculpture and mainly to architecture. And while often employed in the propagandistic ways, the human figure and the human experience of space and the relationship with the gods were a central motivation to classical arts. Greetings! I am Miles Morales and I shall be your guide back to the history of classical arts in Greek architecture. Now, here is a fun fact. Even though classical arts encompasses the cultures of Greece and Rome in the many varieties of painting and sculptures, the classical way of art form mainly focuses the art practice of designing and constructing buildings known as architectures. Reasons as to why classical art focuses in the splendors of architectures is due to the influence of one of the great minds in the classical histories of Greek and Roman society who is known as Vitruvius. Moving on to the Greek arts and architectural histories, Greek architecture stretches from 900 BCE, an abbreviation for before Common Era, to the 1st century CE or Common Era, with the earliest extant stone architecture dating to the 7th century BCE. Example of this is an overview of basic building typology which demonstrate the range and diversity of Greek architecture. The most recognizable Greek structure is the temple. The Greeks referred to the temples with the term hunaos, meaning dwelling, and temple derived from the Latin term templum. The basic form of the naos emerges as early as the 10th century BCE as a simple rectangular room with projecting walls called antae that created a shallow porch. During the time of the Archaic period, the tenets of the Doric order of architecture in the Greek mainland became firmly established, leading to a wave of monumental temple building during the 6th and 5th centuries BCE. Take note, the multi-phase architectural development of sanctuaries such as that of Hera on the island of Samos demonstrate not only the change that occurred in the construction techniques over time but also how the Greeks reused sacred spaces with the later phases built directly atop the preceding ones. Example of this order is perhaps the fullest and most famous expression of classical Greek temple architecture, the Heraclean Pantheon of Athens, a Doric order structure of which the Pantheon represents the maturity of the Greek classical forms. On behalf of everyone, I would like to thank you for joining with me on these tours of wonderful educational journey, and if you would direct your attention to the next panel, you will see the Roman arts and architecture awaiting your arrival.
Ancient Roman architecture adopted the external language of classical Greek architecture for the purpose of the ancient Romans, but was different from Greek buildings. becoming a new architectural style. The two styles are often considered one body of classical architectures. Greetings, I am Pamisa, and I shall be your guide back to the histories of classical arts in Roman architecture. Roman art and architecture. Roman architecture was unlikely anything that had come before. The Persians, Egyptians, Greeks, and Etruscans, all of monumental architecture. A good example is this ancient Greek temple in Paestum, Italy. Roman architecture differed fundamentally from this tradition because of the discovery, experimentation, and exploitation of concrete, arcs, and vaulting. Thanks to this innovation, from the 1st century CE, Romans were able to create interior spaces that had previously been unheard of. Romans became increasingly concerned with shaping interior space rather than filling it with structural support. As a result, the inside of Roman building was as impressive as their exterior. On behalf of everyone, I would like to thank you for joining with me on these tours of wonderful educational journey. And if you would direct your attention to the next panel, you will see the medieval arts and architecture awaiting your arrival.
We have arrived to our second destination, the medieval art.
Ladies and gentlemen, I am Cesar Nathaniel and Bigornia. Royal Travel Crew would like to take you into the world of medieval art, where we will see some detailed architecture. Please lend us your eyes and ears. Medieval art and architecture. All through the medieval period, art largely consisted of the architectural design and construction of churches, monasteries, castles, and similar eclectic structures, while homes and other types of buildings were given less attention. Medieval art and architecture brought the integration of sculpture into building. Architectural design and their interior decor showed avid expressions of the deep religious faith of the people of the Middle Ages. The churches served as the center of town life and were designed and built by the people and not the clergy. They serve other purposes that met the requirements of their daily life, with many housing schools, libraries, museums, and picture galleries. Material used by the Middle Ages are the ivory, gold, bright stones, live wall painting, and any other precious metals such as bronze and silver. Byzantine artists beautified everything from buildings to books, and their greatest and most lasting legacy is undoubtedly the icons which continue to decorate Christian churches around the world. Medieval art is generally divided into different types, each of which was expressed differently in different regions and different times. 8 major artistic movements during the medieval period: Celtic, Romanesque, Ottonian, and Gothic art. The examples of art in the medieval age: Byzantine Chalice and the Virgin Mary and Child Mosaic. Thank you.
This is Jumawid speaking. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Royal Travel Crew would like to take you to the world of medieval art, where we will see some detailed architecture. Please lend us your eyes and enjoy. Early Christian art in the year 330 to 880 was developed to some extent in the countries bordering the eastern Mediterranean region, but primarily in central Italy. The early Christian art forms developed after the people of the Roman Empire officially adopted Christianity. As you can see in the middle picture, the Virgin and the Child mosaic by Hagia Sophia is an example of early Christian art from 19th century Christ era in Istanbul, Turkey. The mosaic is located in the apse dome of Hagia Sophia. In the mosaic, Mary is enthroned and she puts her right hand on the shoulder of the child Christ who is seated on her lap. Her left hand holds a handkerchief which is on Christ's knee. It was discovered in 867 CE by Ptolemaios the Patriarch. As Christians gained converts, these new Christians has been brought up on the value of images in the previous cultural experience, and they wanted to continue in this Christian experience. For instance, There was a change in burial practices in the Roman world, away from cremation and inhumation. Outside the city walls of Rome, adjacent to major roads, catacombs were dug into the ground to bury the dead. Families would have chambers or cubicula dug to bury their members. Wealthy Romans would also have sarcophagi or marble tombs carved for their burial. The example of sarcophagus or sarcophagi, as what I mentioned earlier, is the sarcophagus of Junius Bassus in 359 Christ era. The marble tomb was used for burial of Junius Bassus, who died in 359 CE. It has been described as probably the most single famous piece of an early Christian relief sculpture. The sarcophagus was originally placed in or under Old St. Peter's Basilica, was rediscovered in 1597. Wait, who is this Junius Bassus? Junius Bassus is a Roman that was in charge of the government of the capital as Prefectus Orbi, or a high-ranking government, and he died at the age of 42 in 359 CE. Scholars believe that he converted to Christianity shortly before his death, accounting for the inclusion of Christ and scenes from the Bible. So we can say that Junius Bassus had the time to call for a conversion before he died and buried in a sarcophagi. The styles of Romanic and Norman medieval art forms in the year 800 to 1150 were developed in France and other western regions. They are characterized by simple structural forms with window and door openings designed with semicircular archtop section. The term Romanesque art refers to medieval styles of art were greatly influenced by Italy and southern France. Romanesque buildings were huge, strong, and almost forbidding in appearance, but they had simple surface enrichment showcasing the simplistic ways of life of the planners who were monks. Then Jesuits acquired Maria Lac Abbey in 1862, establishing a Collegium Maximum and building a library. So we can say that the abbey had many stories back then before it became a tourist attraction.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I am Scott Christian Paran. Royal Travel Crew would like to take you to the world of medieval art, where we will be seeing some detailed architecture. Please lend us your eyes and ears. Enjoy! Forget the association of the word Gothic to dark, haunted houses, withering heights, or ghostly pale people wearing black nail polish and ripped fishnets. The original Gothic style was actually developed to bring sunshine into people's lives, and especially into their churches. To get past of the accurate definitions of the centuries, it's best to go back to the very start of the word Gothic and to a style that bears the name. Furniture designs were borrowed from their architectural forms and constructions with arches, pillars, and rigid silhouettes or rigid shapes. The style represented giant steps away from the previous, relatively basic building systems that had prevailed. The Gothic grew out of the Romanesque architectural style when both prosperity and relative peace allowed for several centuries of cultural development and great building schemes, from roughly 1000 to 1400. Several significant cathedrals and churches were built, particularly in Britain and France, offering architects and masons a chance to work out ever more complex and daring designs. The most important element of the Gothic style of architecture is the pointed arch, which is likely borrowed from Islamic architecture that would have been seen in Spain at this time. The pointed arch relieves some of the thrust and therefore the stress on other structural elements. It then became possible to reduce the size of the columns or piers that supported the arch. Accordingly, rather than having massive, drum-like columns as in the Romanesque churches, the new columns could be slimmer. This slimness was repeated in the upper levels of the nave so that the gallery and clerestory would not seem to overpower the lower arcade. In fact, the column basically continued all the way to the roof and became part of the vault. In the vault, the pointed arch could be seen in 3 dimensions where the ribbed vaulting met in the center of the ceiling of each bay. This ribbed vaulting is another distinguishing feature of Gothic architecture. However, it should be noted that prototypes of the pointed arches and ribbed vaulting were seen first in the late Romanesque buildings. The examples of Gothic architectures are east end of Salisbury Cathedral, early Gothic arches, Southwell Minster, and the Gothic windows at Glasgow Cathedral.
We have arrived at our third destination, pop art. Ladies and gentlemen, I am Queen Bahay. The royal crew would like to present to you the world of pop art. Before we enter the world of pop art, we must know what is pop art. Pop art looks out into the world. It doesn't look like a painting of something. It looks like the thing itself, according to Roy Lichtenstein. Pop art is the art movement that emerged in 1950s and 1960s, which focuses on hard edges, mundane imagery, irony and wit, and mass production, which also employs commercial techniques such as silk screening. This is also the alternative to abstract expressionism, where the artist aims to make their artwork more mechanical and manufactured than to be noticed that it is handmade. America's pop culture was seen as goldmine of visual materials for pop artists, and this includes comic books, advertising, billboards, and packaging. America is not the only one who made an impact to the pop art world, but also the British. The difference is that British pop art exhibits more academic tendencies, while the American pop art is immediate and aggressive through the use of bold colors and hard edges. This is Andy Warhol's Marilyn diptych in 1962, acrylic on canvas, which silkscreen one row 50 times. If you are wondering what is silkscreen technique, it is a printing technique where a mesh is used to transfer ink onto a substrate. Now we know what is pop art, we may now proceed to the gallery that was created by the Group 1. First, we have Roy Lichtenstein's Wham in 1963, composition from a comic book strip. This is a 2-canvas painting based on an image from a comic book strip, All American Men of War, published by DC Comics in February 1962. Next, we have Stuart Davis, premiere in 1957. There is actually a wonderful story behind it. One day, a person was looking for a pop art artist which he pays for a fortune. So, Stuart Davis happens to be there. So, what he did, he went to the supermarket, buy some stuff, and then used it as an inspiration. You may notice the bag, large, pad, cow, free, new, 100%, and many more. So if you're questioning why didn't he just draw or painted the objects? Well, for him, he wanted it to be more abstract and more familiar to humans. This is Clay Oldenburg's Floor Burger in 1962, painted sailcloth stuffed with foam. So if you're wondering why foam when we can use cement, marbles, and stuff. So for him, he wanted it to be real and feel real. Clay Oldenburg's Clothespin in 1976, architectural scale sculpture in Philadelphia City Hall. He created this after marrying his wife, and he wanted to make small objects into monumental sizes. This is Andy Warhol's Campbell Soup, turkey noodle in 1962. If you are wondering why it had to be a can of soup, well, it is because pop art has its own subject matter. Sometimes it often ranges from common household objects, consumer products like this one, to image from popular media. And here ends my part. Mr. Baysa will be on board with you until you reach your destination. I am Queen Bahay. Thank you for boarding with me.
Claes Oldenburg's lipstick on Caterpillar tracks in 1969 to 1974. A monumental tube of lipstick sprouting from a military vehicle appeared, uninvited, on the campus of Yale University amidst the 1969 student protests against the Vietnam War. While the sculpture may have seemed like a playful, if elaborate artistic joke, Claes Oldenburg's lipstick, ascending, on Caterpillar tracks was also deeply critical. Oldenburg made the 24-foot-high sculpture in collaboration with architecture students at his alma mater and then surreptitiously delivered it to Yale's Bank Plaza. Robert Rauschenberg's bed in 1955. Bed is one of Robert Rauschenberg's first combines, works in which he affixed cast-off items, such as tires or old furniture, to a traditional support. Here he framed a well-worn pillow, sheet, and quilt, scribbled on them with pencil, and splashed them with paint in a style reminiscent of abstract expressionism. Andy Warhol's 129 Die Jet plane crash, in 1962. Warhol created this work after the Air France Flight 007 accident in which 129 people aboard were killed with only 2 survivors. Andy Warhol, The Last Supper 1986. Andy Warhol. A devout Catholic, Warhol attended church every Sunday and worked on this Leonardo da Vinci appropriation passionately. Our hand-screened version features the Italian Renaissance master's work in repeat over a flowing Warhol camouflage creation. This high-low juxtaposition is a fantastic statement of pop art. Some versions of the fresco are barely visible while others are front and center, both favorite Warhol options. James Rosenquist's The Friction disappears in 1965. Rosenquist got his art training on the job, painting billboards in Minnesota and New York City, where he had to make food delicious and cigarettes smokable. The Friction disappears represents the effortless flow of pictures and information in our culture, where unrelated or contradictory ideas overlap one another. Rosenquist painted the car in the same hot hue as the canned spaghetti simply because he liked the color. The tiny electrons orbiting the globe on the car door are like the paths of ideas and images crisscrossing in the modern world. Richard Hamilton's Just What Is It That Makes Today's Home So Different? So Appealing? In 1956. This image is among the most famous in British post-war art. It has come to define the rise of consumer society in the mid to late 1950s and is an icon of pop art, although the original collage created in 1956, on which this print is based, predates that phenomenon by several years. In 1956 Richard Hamilton took part in the This Is Tomorrow exhibition at the Whitechapel Art Gallery. For this group show teams of artists and architects were invited to create discrete zones that accorded with their vision of the future. Hamilton worked with artist John McHale and architect John Volker on the second zone, presenting a sort of funfair vision of the future where sensual perception was stimulated and confused and images culled from a range of sources formed an iconography for the modern world. As part of his contribution to the exhibition catalog, Hamilton made a collage called Just What Is It That Makes Today's Home So Different, So Appealing? That was also made into a poster. Sir Peter Blake's Tattooed Lady in 1958. Blake began a series of paintings of circus women while still a student at the RCA, including Lolia, World's Most Tattooed Lady, 1955, Mimo Rotella's Marilyn in 1962. In 1954, the Calabrian artist Mimo Rotella moved to Rome, and discovered his muse in the city's post-war, pockmarked streets. Rotella began to roam the capital, tearing down sheets of paper heralding the talents of Marilyn Monroe, ministers and circus acts. Passers-by were aghast at his atelier near Piazza del Popolo. The fragments of posters were glued, layer upon layer, onto canvas, before being ripped, torn and scraped to create new, unpredictable forms. Andy Warhol's Mona Lisa in 1963. This Mona Lisa is one of the earliest works for which Warhol employed silk screening, the printing process that he adopted in 1962 to quickly and easily make multiple copies of pre-existing images. Ed Keenhall's The State Hospital, Interior View, in 1966. His motivation to create this piece, The State Hospital, came out of the actual experience of the artist. In 1947 Edward Keenhall began working in a mental hospital in Lake Medicine, Washington. The conditions that the inmates were subjected to affected him. He constructed this piece, in 1966. Claes Oldenburg and Koos van Bruggen's Spoon Bridge and Cherry in 1987 to 1988. Spoon Bridge in Cherry is a sculptural fountain designed by Claes Oldenburg and Koos van Bruggen. It was funded by a $500,000 donation from art collector Frederick R. Weissman and is permanently located in the Minneapolis Sculpture Garden.
We have reached our destination. Thank you for virtually boarding with us. Mabuhay!